welcome back out there in podcast land. It is Stephen Scott on the Brewery Underground podcast for 2025. Scott, we're rolling through 2025, man. We have had so many great episodes, and I have a feeling that you, sir, because you're the one that booked this episode, you have found us a really good group of guests today.
We found a really great guest, Steve. I think we found two great guests, actually. This is great. We're really excited for this one, and we're gonna dive right in here.
Well, let's dive right in. So we have John. He is the brewery experience manager with Founders Brewing Company in Grand Rapids, Michigan. John, I know that before we went on the air, we were asking you how to pronounce your last name, but I'm not going to mess it up. I'm going to let you pronounce your last name for me.
It's Gautraud, but everybody here calls me John G so they can save the embarrassment. I mean, Jeremy and I have worked together for 15 years, and he probably would still struggle with it. So there we are.
I thought it was G. I thought that was
What up, G?
The things you learn in life. What up, G?
Yeah.
And we have Jeremy, who is the brewmaster there. And Jeremy, the same thing. Tell us how to pronounce your last name, my friend.
Sure, it's Kosmicki.
I love it.
Just like it's spelled.
You got that one. Well, welcome, fellas. This is a big deal for us, so thank you very much for being on here. We were talking to people about, hey, we're getting Founders on there. Like, really? Like the Founders? Like, yeah, the Founders.
Like the Founders. I have found my Founders beer. I have come prepared today, my friends. I have got the
Nice.
Founders, the breakfast stout. And the interesting thing about this for me is, I know you all say that this is, more coffee infused. I'm not a big coffee drinker, but I still like it. I've had it a couple of times now, and I keep drinking it. So I do taste the coffee, but there's other things in there as well. Also on the breakfast stout that I like. So Scott, what do you got for us today?
Okay, I'm starting really, really strong, and it's because it's my favorite beer of the year so far, and I'm not kidding. It's the KBS Double Oaked. My friggin' God.
He's going
Now,
big.
it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon here, Central Time, and this is at 12%. But I couldn't wait to break this thing out again. I had it the other day, and I was bragging to people how good this thing was. So this will make my top 5 of the year, and it's my best one so far. It might be the best one of the year by the end of the year. So fantastic job, guys. This is awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad you
Glad
like
What are
it.
you
like
guys
that
sipping on?
Ooh, I'm drinking. Well, I'm here at our Grand Rapids tap room, so I poured a More to Bloom, our little over 6% hazy IPA. So I love all those hop aromas. You both are a little braver than me to do an 8.5% and 12% beer yet, but we'll see by the end of the podcast how it
Yeah,
goes.
well,
Exactly.
yeah, I'm usually disappeared by the last 10 minutes. He's just gone. I've fallen on the floor.
Hey, where did Scott go?
Yeah, just a shot of the back wall and the quiet mic.
Maybe my feet pop up.
Yeah.
Jeremy, you sipping on something?
Yeah, I'm working on a Michigan Pilsner. Have you guys seen this
Yeah.
one yet?
I have not
John's
seen
got
that
the
one yet.
shirt.
You didn't
Nice.
coordinate that part. That was purely coincidental.
I'm gonna finish that
Yeah.
off, and then I got the Centennial on deck here,
Ooh,
so
nice.
I'm prepared.
Yeah,
Cheers.
cheers, everybody.
Hey, all right.
That Michigan, Jeremy, that Michigan one there, is that a newer one for you guys, or?
Yeah, just came out this year, didn't it, John? Or end of last? I'm sorry, I'm still stuck in 2024. Came out in 2024. We started just in Michigan, and I think it's going to the plans to expand a few states. But yeah, it's the home state wanted something of their very own, and I have been working. I really wanted to get a lager, a Pilsner in particular, into the lineup. And I started using some Michigan-grown hops that are featured in this thing. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm going through a bit of a lager phase myself. So, enjoying more of a traditional Pilsner, traditional-ish.
Can I guess that you're not distributing it to Ohio?
I don't think they're gonna want this gold and blue can, right?
Yeah.
Maize
Guys,
and
guess
blue
what?
yeah.
I've had that beer. I've
You
had
have?
that beer. Yeah. No, I was just telling John before we started recording that I was in Michigan. I was actually in Grand Rapids over the summer. I've got a buddy of mine that lives in Holland. So I was at a place called the Park Theater one night in Holland, Michigan, and there it was, the Pilsner. And I was like, when in Rome, you got to have it. So
Cool.
and I liked it quite a bit. So I
Awesome.
really
Good
I
value.
really did. I really liked it quite a bit. And I have to talk a couple real quick before we get into all the great things about your brewery. I got to really talk real quick about my brewery experience up there, or my experience with Founders, because I got up there over the summer, and basically I found Founders everywhere. I mean, the Park Theater, I'm there. I went to a minor league baseball game at the ballpark up there. I saw your big party deck out in right field. That was cool. Going through the Gerald R. Ford International Airport in Grand Rapids. You guys were there too, so
Yeah.
that was pretty cool. But the coolest story I have for you guys is, so when I got into Holland the first night I was there, my buddy that I was with, he was with a group of friends, and all of a sudden he's talking, and he said, "Steve, you're a brewery guy. You got to meet this guy." Well, your co-founder is it's Dave. Tell me how to pronounce his last name.
Engbers.
Okay, his brother Jim was there, hanging out with the group. And so I got to meet him and talk to him for a while about Founders. And before I went home, I took a flight out. That was a disaster because I had connection flights and flying out. He had given me some Founders on the way home, and I can attest to you guys, which should have been a 7-hour flight. Wasn't your fault, of course, because I had a connecting flight that turned into a big mess. But I had Founders in my suitcase. I had 4 bottles packed in there good. I got home about 1:30 in the morning. I'm dead tired, but the first thing I did when I walked into my house, I turned on the lights. I opened up my suitcase to make sure that those bottles were still
Fingers
good.
crossed.
And I can report back that they were.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Damn the rest of the clothes, as long as the bottles are safe.
Yeah. Sweatshirts I can find. The beer was good though. So yeah.
That's all that mattered. That's all that mattered. And I know that wasn't my first venture up there as far as like getting Founders, because I know, we've had it in Nashville, and I'm from Ohio originally. So I've had it in Ohio as well. And I know, Scott, you've had some Founders as well, outside of drinking it today.
We get quite a bit of it down here. I was checking on tap yesterday, and I've had 74 unique Founders.
Oh wow!
So different ones,
not
not counting
salespeople. Yeah.
Absolutely, they're doing a good job in Tennessee, I can tell you.
Well,
And we've
I
got
like to tell a little story about how our salespeople have an easy job. They just have to convince somebody to try it because the beer is going to be good enough where they're going to keep buying it. So as long as they convince somebody to open that tap handle or open the can, then that'll take care of the rest. So good job
Thanks
on
for
that.
the rest. Yeah. You
Yeah.
gotta do all the hard work. They're like, hey, just try it, and it's sold.
Yeah, and I got to tell you guys, I've been through Michigan a lot in my life. It's a long story, but my grandmother, great uncle, many years ago, they lived way the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, like Calumet, and so I've been there as a kid. I was there when I was in my 20s. My dad used to go up there, and the funny thing is, growing up, my dad, even though he lived in Ohio, I'm from Cincinnati originally, he was a Michigan fan. They weren't Ohio State fans. They were Michigan fans. So I have my heart goes down to Michigan a lot. I really love the state of Michigan. And even though that was my very first time that I was in the Western Michigan area, when I came to Grand Rapids and Holland, I really loved it, guys. And I thought the whole area was spectacular.
Yeah, I moved out here for a brief stint at college, but just really fell in love with the city of Grand Rapids and West Michigan in general. It was just it was cool. It was up and coming. A lot of people care about food and beverage and generally having a good time. It's a nice place to live.
Yeah, with all the fresh water, it helps the beer industry, but it also makes it a nice place to hang out all year round too. So
beaches and it's a good time.
We're gonna jump around on you, but that brings me to you just reminding me of something. So Grand Rapids was Beer City, USA for 10 years. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is cool as hell. And then you won, other national awards and things too during that time. And it's amazing because there wasn't even a brewery there in 1996.
Yeah.
Founders
was the first back in downtown.
What does that mean to be Beer City, USA for Grand Rapids? It's got to be a sense of pride. It's got to be, it's got to help with tourism and obviously the beer industry and things. What does that mean to you guys?
I think for me, it's a testament to not only well, the water helps, like I touched on a little bit ago. But I think it's also a testament to the industry how much cooperative work that they have and helping each other troubleshoot. It's not an industry that really tries to push other people down for their own successes. It's an industry that, tries to breed that success. People know that if they're coming here for craft beer, there's a lot of great choices. And I think that is because of all that cooperative work between all the other breweries. So, West Michigan's a beer town. We do have snow like 4 months out of the year. So you got to do something when it's cold outside, and that's usually drink inside. So that might help a little bit too. But
yeah. So John, you're a Founders Education Liaison to Experience Grand Rapids, which is the Beer City USA thing, right? So you're tied directly into that, huh? What does that do? Does that, you just, again, try to bring in tourism? Does it just the whole vibe for the whole city, just try to better that whole situation?
Yeah, I think the city has been great in acknowledging the fact that once they realized, probably 10, 15 years ago, that there were a lot of people coming in, there was a lot of great beer in this town, that it did represent an opportunity for them, but it helps the surrounding businesses. So they, have conventions in here. We're bringing like large groups or large corporations that have employees all over the country. It'll make the attendance for your company outing probably a little higher, knowing that there's so much great beer in town as well too. So the Experience Grand Rapids people have been a blessing to work with because they're trying to promote the city. I think the breweries in general are trying to promote the city because we just want more people to experience West Michigan. And if this is the lure that reels them in, then might as well start there, I guess.
That's amazing. What is it about the water in that area? Is it a certain filtration or just certain lack of iron? What is it like? We live near Kentucky, right? And it's bourbon, a lot of bourbon up that way, and a lot of places around there because of the water and the limestone filtered to iron out. Is there something along those lines?
Well, a lot of West Michigan, and Grand Rapids included, our municipal water source is from Lake Michigan. So it's a very consistent water source. It's got great mineral content. And I think being consistent is part of the thing. If you're pulling from wells or something else, you really got to pay attention. Whereas we get our water report and there is barely anything that ever changes. So once it's dialed in, man, it's dialed in.
Oh, that's
cool. It's a huge advantage.
Do you guys have to add any filtration to it within the brewery just for your own touch or anything, or take that little bit of stuff out or anything? Is there any of that?
No, we really don't.
Mm-mm. That's amazing. That is cool. All right.
Yeah.
I also think that what Jeremy just mentioned is another reason that being a new brewery, you can be so successful because water is one of the things you don't have to worry about. So you don't need to expend a lot of equipment on fancy water treatment or anything. So you can just focus on your beer recipes, knowing the water is going to be there like all the time and not needing to adjust it to make your beer taste better or be more palatable.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think Asheville's a little bit that way too. I think that's kind of the draw, like the water source is a thing there too.
Yeah.
Such a big part of beer making, and you really can develop your 90% of these beers are water source, and a lot of things go into it, but your water can definitely give you a house flavor. We're just real fortunate that we don't have to mess around a whole lot, with either like stripping it down and then trying to rebuild and recreate. And, that can be fun if you really want to get into like, a particular water styles to make certain styles of beers, but it works for what I'm trying to do. And it's just, like I said, it's your own house flavor. So if my Pilsner's never going to have soft enough water to be like, somewhere in Europe, but it works. It's got its own thing going.
That's fantastic.
I think, what was it, like 10 years ago, we had the American Homebrewers Association National Meet was here in Grand Rapids, and we hosted, I believe it was like a Q&A, Jeremy, if I remember correctly. And there was a couple homebrewers that were like, we're super detailed, we're trying to be extra clean, but when I make it at my buddy's house and my house, I can never get them to taste the same. So after digging a little deeper, it was exactly like Jeremy said. One of them is in the middle of the country, doing well water, and the other one lives downtown and doing city water. It's like, well, you just admitted to changing 90% of the recipe. It's never going to.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's something that probably like homebrewers, when they're first starting out, they don't think about, right?
Yeah, they probably take it for granted, is my guess. But yeah.
I do a little bit in the garage, and I always go get distilled water from the grocery store, but I don't know that Nashville water would be bad for. I just never done. I've always just had, so it's just the same. When I do it, it's the same thing every time.
Yeah,
that's good for consistency. Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I can say that over the summer when I was up there, I went swimming in Lake Michigan.
Good. You gotta do that while you're in town.
And the water seemed pretty fine to me. So hopefully I didn't pollute it at all.
Well, yeah. How early in the summer was it? Because that lake might still be about 55 degrees. So.
It was in July. It was actually during for up there. It was during a time that you all were having kind of some really warmer weather. Although I had to laugh the night I got into Holland, and I was at this outdoor music festival. It's like 9 o'clock, and I'm going, all right. It's like July 17th, 18th. I can feel the taste of fall a little bit up here, only because I'm in Nashville. Coming from Nashville where it's like 100 degrees, humidity's 1,000%. So the difference, but no, it was fantastic. Want to talk to you guys about the history of Founders because obviously Founders was founded in 1997, and you both have been there for a long time. You have seen a lot of changes during that time. Can each of you really talk about that over time? What you've seen at Founders as you've been working there?
Gary, you wanna kick us off because you're at what 24, 25 years now?
Sure, I'll do a quick history. Yeah, so I started in 2000. Came on board as a part-time guy on the bottling line. I mean, this was real Laverne and Shirley stuff. You're putting the bottles on, you're taking them off, putting them in cases, gluing the cases, stacking them onto pallets. Mind you, none of those jobs exist today. They are all done by robots and machines. So,
little technology.
I was an unemployed home brewer, so I was just thrilled to get a foot in the door of a brewery. And, we were small time then. I think we were making a little over 1,000 barrels. But we had a 30-barrel brew house. They were trying to be a production brewery. And they had a decent-sized pub, too. But there just was lacking. It was just lacking a little bit of something to differentiate it, we had an amber ale and a pale ale and a wheat beer and a lager, everything that the breweries in the 1990s were told that this is what you need to serve your people. So I think, over a few years, I became assistant brewer in 2002. We hired a good friend of mine who had been brewing out of New Holland, where you were at, Steve, not that long ago. So we had a little experience in the industry. We actually had the same brew house as those guys, and we had been homebrew buddies. So we had some recipes, we had some ideas, and the kind of beers we wanted to make were quite a bit more adventurous than what Founders was doing at the time. And Mike and Dave, I think they had been trying to get this going, and were seeing the struggle, and kind of just tossed the keys to the ride and said, hey, you guys make experiment, do some stuff, try some stuff. So out of that was born things like breakfast stout and Red's Rye. One of the first things we did was try to fix the IPA, with some different dry hopping techniques to try to make beer that we wanted to drink. That's really what it was all about. And what a cool opportunity to just have this brewery at our disposal. A couple of, home brewers with not a whole lot of experience, but with the trust of our owners to, try something. And I don't think they had other options at the time. So, but, it worked out for all of us.
You got to play on that big equipment, right?
Yeah, I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to figure out on the job. And Nate Walser, the brewer that I worked with, he was really good at figuring stuff out, and he's responsible for a lot of the direction that sent us down that road. And I took over head brewer in 2005. Kind of gave up the day-to-day by 2016 or something, and now I focus on recipe development, trying to figure out what's new, what's next in this crazy industry of ours.
Throwing darts, writing good recipes.
I didn't know this. Going back to the history, it wasn't even originally called Founders. It had two other names before that. Am I right?
Canal Street Brewing Company.
Yeah, and John Pennell Brewing before that, and then Canal Street, and then wasn't it something about they had the name Founders above it because they were calling out the founders of something, and people just kept calling it Founders?
I think they were trying to do Bell's Brewery was called Kalamazoo Brewing Company, makers of Bell's beer. So I think they were kind of doing Canal Street Brewing Company, makers of Founders beers. Our checks still say Canal Street Brewing Company, so that's the that's
and
the real
clear
name.
now, so that's good.
And they clear now.
Jeremy, one of the things that I love to ask people that brew beer, and we did a podcast just recently here in Nashville, a new brewery, fairly new. They've been open about 2 years, Marble Fox, and the owner's son, who's fairly young, he brews beer, and I asked him this question, and I love asking this question of guys that brew. Where do you get your ideas? I mean, do you sometimes just sit at home, you're sitting on the couch or watching TV, and all of a sudden, boom, an idea comes to mind? I mean, how does that work in your brain?
It certainly happened that way. Inspiration comes in a lot of forms. You can be inspired by just flavors in general. I tend to think, one of my strongest suits is flavor recognition, and then trying to turn that into a beer or some sort of beverage with, using the raw materials that I have available to me. Trying other people's beers can be very inspiring. Whether it's sometimes it's like, wow, that's pretty good beer. I wonder if I can make it better. How can I achieve it better? So that's always you find inspiration out there in the market. Not that I'm copying people. I just I'm being inspired and
inspiration, of course.
And sometimes you're just thinking. I do some of my best thinking out mowing the lawn and riding the tractor around the yard and thinking about what is it? What do I want to drink? And these days it's more like, gosh, what does everybody else want to drink? Because my drinking, the people that were drinking craft when I got in the industry are getting a little bit old these days, and maybe not, the only consumer that we can look at anymore. So I think about what are the kids drinking these days is on my brain a lot, and it's a little bit hard for me to come to grips with, honestly. But
in my mind, I go, there's a lot of like farmland up there too in certain areas, and you're going driving down the road, I see a wheat field. Maybe what's the next wheat beer I can come up with?
Right.
Jeremy, you bring up a good point. The people, the drinkers now, this younger generation, they're all over the place, aren't they?
All over the place.
Like not over here, but they're all over here. I mean, it's non-alcoholics, it's seltzers, it's ciders, it's a million different things. THC,
and they move quick too.
Yeah. How is that to try to keep up with?
Well, it's a challenge for sure. We're a fairly big brewery, and fairly big breweries are not necessarily very nimble as far as like changing direction quickly and catching trends and fads and stuff. When you're a little guy and you just make whatever you want and you sell it to your tap room, sure, you can be the first guy on the block to turn out this hot new trend. But man, I'm already working on 2026 innovation. So if anything great happens the rest of 2025, it's going to be 2027 before Founders can get a piece of it.
Yeah, I think that's machine, Scott, you mentioned part of it too is like the beer scene, and my experience with the industry. You talk to my grandparents' generation, and when they drink beer, that's one beer. It's whatever their favorite might be. But I think now people are more apt to try, knowing there's more flavors out there where beer isn't just the yellow fizzy cans or whatever. So that's kind of fun because you have an excited customer base that wants to come try new things. But the downside is that they like to try a lot of different things. So like Jeremy said, I think that's where the challenge is that they might have their favorite six-pack, but they also want to try what else is there and see if they can rotate some favorite beers into that six-pack from time to time. So makes it exciting. I mean, for me, I get to be the beneficiary because that means there's always new stuff down in the tap room to drink. So as a willing participant to our quality control process, I'll do what I can.
You're probably learning some of these or tasting some of these at the same time some of your patrons are too, probably, right? As they come in like, hey, well, it just came on. Let's try it together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is an interesting conversation you bring up, like, because like both of you guys can talk about this, but when you started there, all of a sudden you're going, okay, we're trying to come up with these bold, different flavors, but people have been used to the domestics for a long period of time. And maybe I'm wrong when I say this, but like especially up north, because you have a lot of the same beer in some of the same areas that people have been used to for years. So, I mean, obviously you guys have achieved success in getting people to latch on to a lot of the new offerings that you have.
Yeah, I think the testament, honestly, to speak to our team, and normally I like to try to keep Jeremy humble, but I'll actually give him some kudos now that we're, broadcasted live. But I think the success is the consistency of our product, but also the depth of flavors with all the different styles that are out there, doing a good representation of all those different styles, and knowing that having those variety of offerings, not everybody loves and drinks the same thing. It might depend on what they're doing, what they're eating. So just having the variety available, especially here, like you mentioned in the Midwest, where it might be 4 degrees or 75 degrees in like a 2-week span, which happened a couple weeks ago here. So having that variety helps a little bit.
John, you get a lot of people that come in and be like, "Hey, you never had craft beer or not sure," and like, "Hey, I need something. Do you have anything that tastes like Bud Light, or do you have anything that tastes like Coors Light?" And you kind of like, "Hey, we have
Milwaukee's
something
best.
along those lines." Yeah,
Yeah,
and you point them to.
that was I think what the challenge at first is we would have a lot of beer fans that got to know our KBSs that were 12% and maybe begrudgingly drag some family members with them that maybe weren't in the mood for a 12% barrel aged beer. So just for the safety of, our travelers having a lower ABV option in the beginning. But I think it's kind of fun to see how the industry has grown where more and more people are comfortable with it, because there was a lot of, I would say, trepidation about trying something new when I was started in the industry, like, well, technically 20 years ago, basically, but the last 14 years here, basically. So that's been the exciting part, is seeing how willing people and open are to change, as opposed to, the fear of it not tasting exactly the same as the one beer that they're used to.
Sure, and if you walk into a place like that, they get to experience it too. Well, I'm here, so let me try something. I'm in this great place I've never been before, and people start recommending things, and like, they're probably more apt to try it, I would think.
Yeah, it was a little overwhelming. I mean, when I started here working in the tap room, because I started working in our bar, I'll wave again so the lights turn on. People were used to a bar having like 8 beers on tap, and then they walked in and we had like 35, and this was before you started seeing some of those beer bars with up to 100 handles. So I think just the overwhelming amount of choices was like hard for people just to make a choice when they had so many to choose from. It almost seemed like if we only had 4 beers, it would have been easier for some of our early customers back then.
You see, just staring up at the board, they're just like,
oh yeah, it was like deer in headlights. So it was amazing. I mean, for those of you down south, the deer just freeze in the middle of the road in the winter.
Yes.
As a driver, but
and you have no choice but to hit them.
Yeah, I mean, it's that or a tree. So but I think that's kind of the cool part, though, too, is that having those choices, because we used to get, and probably still to this day, a lot of, non-craft beer drinkers. But once you get something and kind of can work with them on what flavors they like, and what we try to train our staff to do is, you don't have to know every single beer out in the world, because that's just too much to ask our staff member. Oh, there we go again. But knowing what kind of flavors they enjoy, and then the depth of our portfolio and having those on, is usually there's something you can find that they're going home happy with. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. Yeah, no
And
doubt.
it's interesting because don't you think, though, when Jeremy, when you started there and all of a sudden you're supposed to, they want you to come up with these bold new flavors. Don't you think it was about time, though? I mean, the domestic brands have been out there for a long time. It was like, it's about time people have a lot other choices.
I completely was into the craft beer movement. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and I was just thrilled to be able to be a part of it. I mean, watching that industry grow, watching founders grow. I mean, it was incredible. It's I wouldn't trade it for anything. The first all of a sudden, so let me tell you a quick KBS story, right? So we made KBS. We made a really small amount. I think we had like 4 bourbon barrels of it the first year. Yeah. And we were just playing around, bottled it up, put it out and we had in the tap room, there was a to-go cooler. And that's how we sold beer to go. And, we put some in there and it just freaking sat there, man. Nobody cared about that at all. They're like, what is that? Bourbon stout? Yeah, it's like $20. I'm not buying that thing. So, fast forward.
Back then.
Yeah, right, probably. But, it only took a couple of years before one day the KBS released, and there was a line around the block of the brewery. And I was like, what? Where did all these people come from? But it was Rate Beer Advocate, those beer rating sites were starting to gain some popularity and use, and certainly helped with hyping us breweries, or at least letting the people talk about what they're excited about. And Founders became kind of a name on there, and people came from all over the place to try this KBS that a few people started raving about. It was wild.
Yeah.
I know Scott and I. Yeah, go ahead.
I felt very word of mouth in the early days. Like those beer websites be like, I could go up to Grand Rapids and try this from the source kind of thing, because they saw it was rated well, or it was very, a friend of mine let me try this, so we had to come. And then each year it kept getting more and more, and they tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends. Like that's what it felt like all the time.
Well, they're discovering something they've never had or experienced before. Like, what is this new thing all of a sudden? And then people are falling in love with it. And it's like you said, it's almost overnight. I mean, it's crazy. you guys were on the front end of that, that movement, in the early 2000s or the late 90s. It's amazing because that's when I was getting into it. I was trying everything, the craziest flavor. And I still do. The craziest flavors you come out with, I will try it. I will drink it.
Yeah, put it out there. We'll try it. Hey, I'm curious. You guys, there's always rankings. Where do you guys officially rank now, as far as like up breweries across the United States?
Like production size wise, or
yeah, just when you see it ranking out, these are the top 10, 15 breweries across the United States.
Yeah, probably size wise.
Yeah, size wise.
Jerry might know, but I think we're inside the top 10 of craft beer. From a production barrel size. I don't quote me on the exact number. So we're a very large regional craft brewery, basically, is where that puts us.
It got a little weird with the laws of the Brewers Association and who counts as craft beer, because if you are owned in a certain percentage by a larger brewery, then you're exempt. So, but that's kind of a lot of breweries right now, a lot of like bigger breweries. Yeah. So I haven't seen a list in a while, but I bet for what you consider to be craft, we're probably still top 10 in volume.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, when you first started, Jeremy, could you even imagine? I mean, was there a plan? In 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to be top 10 in the United States. Here we are in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah, no, my plan was learn as much as I could about this before I had to go get a job somewhere else. Because it was not looking very good, my friends. It was the first many years at Founders were just a struggle. I mean, we were having fun and I was learning a lot and we were doing things that were cool, but Founders was in a pretty big hole by the time I got here. They'd only been around 3 years, and when I first learned of the grave nature of our finances, I was pretty worried. And but man, we pulled through. Mike and Dave, kudos to them for just scratching and clawing their way out of a debt and building what we built.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
Oh, I was about to say, especially since the beers we were making were 12%, which doesn't lend to a lot of high volume repeat customers safely anyway. So it was, I think it was taking pride in the liquid and hoping that the customer base would slowly show up. I think is what it ended up working out pretty well for us.
And they totally did. You guys are in all 50 states, right? I mean, now it's is that considered a national brewery because you are in all 50?
Yeah.
Was that it's at some point, probably not from day one, but at some point, did you guys look up and be like, we can do this as a national thing? Was that a goal somewhere along the way? Say when you got to say 30 or whatever, you look up and you're like, I think we should be, a national distributor.
Yeah, I think once you reach those kind of state numbers, you're like, well, if people want it, we can put some beer in the back of a semi truck and figure out some wholesaler networks to do it. Yeah, we have some parking lot space we can still tear down to make more brewery in, but having talked to Mike and Dave a little bit, I don't know if there was like a hard goal, like this many states by this year, but I think naturally as we were able to produce more beer and more people wanted it, then, might as well let them try it.
And that's definitely a big thing. You got, I'm sorry, Steve, I was going to say, you've got, Jeremy, you've got to make that much beer too at the same time. Yeah. Hey, we're going to add 10 states. Are you kidding me?
No, there was a real struggle. I mean, we were at capacity for so long. I had 3 brewers and we had to turn this thing around the clock. And it was maxed out. Those are wild times.
And raw materials to make sure we're going to need enough of the Centennial hops to make Centennial with. And one of the advantages, I think that I shouldn't say advantages, but one of the successes for that growth was always working with those growers to kind of let them know where we're at and let them know where our needs were, because that's the struggle too. And like Jeremy kind of touched on with beer development, if we're going to sell beer all over the place, we need a lot of something that might not exist enough of to make 50 states of right away if we're going to release it to everybody. So sometimes that's why things are maybe only regional releases, but we love everybody to enjoy stuff. It's just sometimes the amount of hops we might need from a grower might not exist yet. So.
Sorry,
yeah, I think it's cool to point out too that on your website, technology, you're gonna love it, at foundersbrewing.com, there is a beer finder section for each state where people can go on, they can look to see what's going on locally, where Founders is found. And I think you just said that, John, So I guess it's like regional releases. Maybe not every beer that you all put out, like the Michigan Pilsner, maybe is not going to be found in like Idaho, but
Yeah.
some of the other ones, is there quite a bit of beer from Founders that gets distributed to all 50 states?
Yeah, I think some of it's based on, the demand in certain areas. So,
Sure.
A wholesaler, and you just use Idaho again, might have the option to buy that breakfast stout that you're drinking, but if the customer base isn't there, so they might not find it as much. So it's always available. We can always make more of it. But that beer finder is kind of huge because with our 250-ish wholesaling partners around the country, I don't know everybody's inventories, but you can kind of find where some of the beer's been dropped off, because I believe you can search for it on draft at bars and restaurants, as well as packaged beer and to-go stores as well too. So I think that's a nice touch, and it was well done working with our wholesalers to make that work, as well as integrating it into our website.
If you guys are running short on some supply and you're like, hey, we need a little more, do you just take it away from Ohio? You just like, Ohio, we're going to cut back here. We're going to send it to Kentucky's getting it. I don't know if that's a thing. Or I'm picking on Ohio.
We got a whole team of people to figure that out. I'm not sure how we do it, but that sounds like a pretty good strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of our top 50 states, so we love Ohio. We want them to get all the beer they need.
Well said. Actually, as far as the 50 states go, and maybe this is more of a distribution thing, but do you have to alter the recipes in any way for different states with ABV laws or anything? Does that not even factor in anything?
You want to talk about Ohio a little bit more?
Yeah. 2012 Ohio distribution was a fun time at the company.
So I think you had a 12% cap back then, and the breakfast stout or the KBS came in at 12.2 that year or something. So
and that's for distributing into the state. Then that's not even just making it there. Okay.
So we had two options: either Ohio doesn't get any KBS, or we brewed them specifically for them. I think maybe it got deaerated, watered down to hit into that 12% spec or something. But it was like, it happens. There's every state's got its own laws. They all got their own weird little quirks and things. And so we have a team of people that focuses strictly on making sure that we're labeling the beer correctly, and going through all the right steps of the process. That's a lot to it.
Also, I would say, like, in the last 10 years, that's a big change too, where some of those laws are being a lot more, restructured, so they're not quite as strict, and knowing that these states are seeing the opportunity for their own business growth as well too. So it's made it a little bit easier, but it was a long road to hoe, and some states are easier to distribute than others. So we
actually heard that. We had the owner a few months ago. You guys are probably familiar with Braxton in like Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky. We had the owner on last year, and he was even talking about that because they, even though they're in Kentucky, they do have a location in Ohio. He was even talking about some of that, back and forth, and the difficulty sometimes that can experience from state to state.
Yeah, that's wild.
He's two different states, but they're across the river, and he's still got two different points of distribution and that whole thing. And literally it's 10 minutes, but it's a whole different thing. It's in a different world. John, you're part of the sensory panel, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is? Because it sounds like a really cool job. What is that? What do you get to do there? Do you get to try a lot of beer?
I will say, first, when I joined, I thought it was just us drinking and hanging out. Like, it was more like a book club without reading any books. But it's a lot more. It's a lot more detailed than that. So a testament to our quality assurance team is that we do batch sensory on every single beer, and there's about, I would say, close to 24 of us now, maybe, Jer, that are on that the sensory team, where we do a lot of training. So like training our palate to be sensitive to it. When you go to a grocery store, you see oranges, you smell oranges, but you can't sometimes pick that up in beer because there's no visual cues. So there was a lot going in there to have everybody use common language, so we were, all referring to the same thing. But it was honestly probably about a year of continual training every single day. We're encouraged to be participants in sensory. We have it every day, Monday through Friday, but at least twice a week, so we get that, the repetition down. But it's really kind of just mostly what it is just slowing yourself down, really kind of focusing on the aromas, breaking down some of the flavors. It might have ruined my palate as just a casual beer drinker for the rest of my life, but it does bring a lot of greater appreciation into some of the recipe development and the depth of the beers that not only we produce, but a lot of people produce. That it is kind of nice, finding the depth in a barrel-aged stout might be easy, but finding some depth and, subtle flavors in a Pilsner makes it just as enjoyable as well, too. So And then we have the pride knowing that all the beer that we've tried is going out with our stamp of approval. But we do take it very seriously because it's also how we help set like our shelf life for beers so that flavor and aroma integrity is consistent and what that window of consistency is. So there's a lot that kind of goes into it.
Yep,
Okay.
the panel checks every beer that ever goes through that place. You know, the analytics will tell you one thing, microbiological testing will tell you some more too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the sensory panel that is ultimately, you know, does this stuff taste right?
Yeah.
And we'll flag it if it doesn't, and if there's something wrong with the batch, we're going to look into it and figure out either what happened or what we got to do to get it where it needs to be. And it's important for me to keep my finger on that pulse of are things changing, because I don't, you know, I can't possibly just drink every batch randomly. So having this focus of making me try every batch of Dirty Bastard that comes through. I don't drink a lot of Dirty Bastard, really only in sensory panel, but that helps me to, you know, keep my finger on that pulse, make sure everything's tasting good. So
yeah.
Hey, Jeremy, were you the sensory panel in the beginning?
Yeah, pretty much, right?
You was the only one on the.
And some of the regulars in the tap room, like fans of a beer, like, this tastes a little different this time.
Yeah, Jeremy, would you change the recipe? No.
Yeah. Oh no, I still hear that all the time, right?
Oh yeah.
Everybody thinks they can pick it out when I change a recipe.
Everybody's fourth Dirty Bastard always tastes different than the first three. So, yeah.
It doesn't seem as strong as the first two.
Yeah, I can really taste it.
Jeez. John, did that sensory panel help you, or maybe with your Cicerone training, or did one come before the other one, or did they were they parallel?
It kind of went hand in hand. Some of that started in my career before I worked at Founders. I used to work at bars and was a beer buyer, and then long time ago with our eventual wholesaler, which I didn't know would be at the time before my life took me down this path. But I think you do try a lot of different beers in sensory. But also with the Cicerone training, it gives you kind of you need to know a lot of the different styles of beer. And, you know, there's certain styles in the Cicerone program focuses on that Founders just doesn't make a lot of. But it gets you in that mindset to really start breaking down the beers and recognizing those flavors. So yeah, I always find that, you know, everybody learns differently. So when we set up our trainings, having not only like print media, visual, like sensory kind of media just helps things stick a little bit better. So from a retention standpoint, so my wife being a teacher really helps.
Yeah. But it's got to, like, if you wanted to continue the Cicerone thing, the sensory panel still got to help you along the way. It's almost like a continuing education in a sense.
Yeah, because part of the testing, if no one's done it before, is there is a sensory panel where you're getting a lot of blind samples and having to first identify possible off flavors, which we do in our sensory team with food safe flavor spikes that they do, just so we're in practice and can recognize common things that might happen in beer making, but also different styles. So you're familiar with that, just so you know what everybody else is kind of doing. So it is pretty important, but that is part of the testing. So having that practice already going in definitely helps a little bit. So if anybody's thinking about doing it.
And to your point, I bet when you go into just some random place and you order a beer that's not Founders, right?
Yeah.
You're like, something off with this thing. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know if I tell them or not, but something's wrong with this beer.
Well, and to some extent, we've talked about it a little bit internally, and I think that's one of the challenges of breweries now, because, you know, Jeremy mentioned there was a lot of learning new equipment and stuff, so we understand that there's some growing pains, but, you know, when Founders was test driving new things, the same 6 people would come in and drink the beer, so you had a little bit more leeway. Now, as a new brewery, you have a full tap room maybe day one because everybody wants to try the new place to carry some craft beer. So that, you know, leash is a little shorter because people have other options. So it's something that, you know, we appreciate with new breweries, but at the same time, we want to give that feedback if they're searching it out. And the company our size, we have people that usually know folks at a lot of these other breweries, so we can kind of help them with any issues they might be having.
No doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think our brewery, even a small one, like you said, you want that consistency, you want that quality. If it's good the first 3 times you go, the 4th time you go, like something's weird.
Yeah.
So whatever, something might change. Yeah.
I used to homebrew, and people ask me, because I work at a brewery, everybody here has to make beer. I wasn't good at it. I wasn't patient enough. I would just wing it from whatever recipe, you know, at the home brewer shop they said. I was like, well, I have some of this, I'll just throw that in there. So I don't homebrew anymore because people like Jeremy and the folks that work here are way better at it. So I don't want to wait around for the garbage that I was making when I could just drink the good stuff.
Well, that was part 1 with John and Jeremy from Founders Brewing Company. We know it left you wanting more. We're sorry. but you're just going to have to be patient until next week. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed this one. We look forward to bringing you part 2 next week. Cheers.